welcome to Orange Sunday. I'm so glad to see everybody here, and it looks like the vast majority of you got the memo, and you're wearing at least a coral or some type of orange out there. And if you forgot, then we had leis and everything that people are wearing. I love looking out here. So for those of you that are at home, maybe you're wearing some orange PJs or something just to show that same sentiment. We're glad that you're joined us this morning as well. And my name is Marty Baker. I work with the middle school and the high school students and their families. And so, did I just get a woo? Oh, okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, so we have a lot of fun in our student ministry, and I look forward to Orange Sunday every year. And honestly, we had to skip it last year, so this is our first time to do this in a couple of years, and I am thrilled. I've been waiting for this time to come because this is when we talk about that partnership that the church, as the light of the world, that yellow represented by the church, partners with the red that is the heart of the family, and they come together to form something awesome as we think orange and how we approach everything with the next generation. But I got to admit, I'm a little bummed today because this isn't going like I thought. You know, this morning I woke up and I got here and everything was going wrong. I had these great dreams for how this was going to go, but more than that, I'm used to having my partner in crime up here with me. Amy Newton. Let's see if we can. You may have to follow me, Carice. There he goes. All right. The children's minister, Amy Newton. She is usually up here matching one-on-one with my crazy, and we're able to present all of this together, and she is having to quarantine. Today is her last day of quarantine. She gets to come out of it tomorrow. Isn't that sad? And she's like, no, I really wanted to be part of Orange Sunday. But she's not. She's joining us right now online in the same way, and she was able to put together a video, and so we're so thankful for her. But man, we always plan this together. I mean, we dream about what this is going to be like together. We plot out the course. We know what the songs are going to be. We know how things are going to run. And then all of a sudden that got thrown out the window. Despite our greatest dreams, we had to kind of adapt this week. You ever have to do that? It's great whenever you have a dream or an aspiration and it goes well. I love that, right? Whenever you are able to accomplish your dreams, right? That's nice. That's great. Whenever you set a goal and it works out well, that's great. I've been spending the last couple of weeks, or I guess about a week or so ago it ended, but watching the Olympics. And anybody that watched the Olympics, you heard all about Simone Biles. And man, that girl is incredible. She is so impressive. But one of the coolest things for me to watch was the lead up to whenever she would do her qualifying stuff. And they'd always show these little videos of her as this little kid, just flipping all over their house, right? As a little bitty kid, she just has these great dreams for how this is going to work. And she said, I want to be the best. I'm going to be the best gymnast ever. And she accomplished that. She is undeniably the best gymnast, best female gymnast, at the very least, I would argue the best gymnast, period, to ever grace the Olympics. And it's cool to watch that. I remember growing up, and I watched basketball, all right? Michael Jordan was my favorite. And, whenever he was young and starting off, he had dreams of being the best basketball player ever. But he wasn't that great at it. He had to work really hard. He had to set goals and push himself. But he got there. He was the greatest to ever live. And it's awesome whenever you watch those old videos of MJ, just trying to come along. And as he's developing and as he's becoming stronger and faster and better, it's really cool to watch that development happen. But that doesn't always happen, does it? I think that the reason why I love those kinds of videos of young them with all these goals and dreams and everything, and then them accomplishing it, is because I remember third grade Marty, whenever I was let's go gymnastics, right? And I learned how to do a back handspring. I know looking at me now, I don't look like I could do that, but I did. I learned how to do a back handspring, and that was it. That's all I ever learned. It didn't last more than a year for me. And I like seeing the things like Simone Biles because my goals didn't always work out, right? I'm not the best basketball player. I'm not the best at a lot of things. Possibly the best at anything. I don't know. We'll see. But I love watching people shoot for their goals. But we also know that for everybody, there are goals that just don't work out, even those who are the best. Simone Biles went into this Olympic season into Tokyo expecting to win all these golds, and then things happen. Now, she came out of there victorious in a lot of different ways than she ever has before, but she didn't come out of there with the goals that she had set for herself. You know, sometimes those things fall. I watched Michael Jordan try baseball. That didn't work out too well, right? I mean, he will tell you that he was great and that he worked hard, but that was a failed experience. I mean, like it did not really work out all that well for MJ moving over to baseball. But that happens across the board, doesn't it? I mean, it happens with a lot of us. But you know, I'm wondering, as you think of your dreams, what about your God-given dreams? Have you given much thought to those lately? I mean, the dreams that God places on your heart, the things that you should do, or the things that you feel led to do or driven to do in this world to make it a better place, to pull in the kingdom of God in the here and now. Have you thought about that much? I mean, because if I'm honest, I would probably bet that most of us in this room, or maybe even just some of us, but probably most of us didn't wake up this morning going, God gave me a dream for today. God is planning on doing something in me and through me today, and I'm excited to see how that works out. Some of you may have even had those dreams at one point and lost them. But some of you in here, you did wake up that way this morning. Man, I've got this vision for what God's going to accomplish through me. I've got this vision for what God's doing through this church, and I'm excited to see it work out today. In the next week, in the next month, in the next year, I've got some great things that I see God putting on my heart. Where are your dreams? What do you do with those? Or what do you do with the dreams of others whenever they come to you? You know, one of the greatest things that I like about working with children and students is that they have huge dreams. I mean, you can't tell them that they're not going to do something. They're going to do it. They're going to be the biggest and the best ever. And the truth is, they see God in ways that some of us have forgotten how to see God. They see God as huge. They see God as powerful. They see God as able to do anything. And they move forward accordingly. Man, I love that. And we need that around us. But what do you do whenever those dreams come to you? Whether your own dreams or someone else's. You know, in the Bible, we see a guy who was known as a dreamer. In the Old Testament, this guy was known because he had these dreams and he kind of spread it around, but he was known as being a dreamer. His name was Joseph. Now, Joseph, you know, he was the youngest son of Jacob. He had a lot of brothers and everything. They came from a mixed and blended family. There was a whole lot of stuff that happened to make that happen, but we see Joseph show up in Genesis chapter 37, right? And in Genesis chapter 37, we see Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now then, if you're trying to build good rapport with your brothers, this is not a good way to start, especially if you're 17 years old. You should know better, right? I mean, Joseph doesn't really get along well with his brothers, but this was his job because his father Jacob, also named Israel, his father Jacob, that's the job that he gave him. Hey, go check on those brothers of yours and come back, bring me a report. Well, it didn't always turn back favorable, but man, did Jacob love his son Joseph. You know, the reason for that is because Joseph wasn't the first dreamer in their family. You know, Jacob, actually his dad, Jacob, was a dreamer himself. He had huge dreams as well. There's a time whenever we're told that Jacob lays his head on a rock and dreams this incredibly elaborate dream. And God says the same thing to Jacob that he had said to Abraham long before. And that is, you're going to have a lot of descendants and you're going to be blessed. And all nations of the world are going to be blessed through you. And man, he wakes up and he's excited. I got the same dream that my forefather Abraham did. I mean, I got the same dream, and God's going to bless me, and nations are going to be blessed through me. And so he gets up right then and immediately starts looking for a wife. I mean, let's get this done, right? I mean, if the nations are going to be blessed through me, I'm going to have a partner with me to do this. And he goes looking, and he walks up to this well, and he sees a girl named Rachel. And the Bible says that Rachel was stunning. She was absolutely beautiful. But, you know, we don't just see that. We see that he gets to know her and is like, hey, can I go like find your dad so I can meet him so that we can like go ahead and get this marriage thing going? Like, that'd be nice. And so he goes with her, and here's what we learn. Laban is Rachel's dad, right? And it says, now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Now, you would think that it would be enough for the Bible to just say, hey, Rachel was pretty. Like, why you got to bash Leah, right? But as much as you would look at this and think that, it's worse if you know the Hebrew, right? Because what this actually is, the name Leah is actually wild cow. Yeah, Laban names one of his daughters wild cow. So whenever you read this, it would actually read that, go back one real quick. Yeah, there we go. That his older daughter, wild cow, and the name of the younger daughter, Rachel, and wild cow had weak cow eyes. Now then, but Jacob was in love with the pretty one. All right, now this is a sad little piece of writing, and I don't know why they would put this in, but it's just kind of like randomly thrown into the story. But what we know is that Jacob loves Rachel, and he works 7 years for her. And then what happens is, after that 7 years, he goes to Laban and is like, all right, 7 years are up. I'm ready to be married. I wanted to be married 7 years ago. I had this vision. I got this blessing from God. It's time to start. All right, so Laban's like, okay, here you go. You know, here's the wedding. We do the wedding, and then you go, and they go to consummate their vows. And the Bible says that the next morning, Jacob wakes up and, it's wild cow. You know, and so, but not just that, like I had a professor that said, you know, this is literally like cow eyes, right? I mean, like that's what Jacob notices, and he immediately marches over to Laban and is like, this is not what we agreed to. And Laban says, I know, but she's the older daughter, and like we have to get her married first, and so how's about 7 more years? And so Jacob's like, okay, but give me Rachel, right? Like we've been wanting this. And so he gets married to Rachel, and thing after thing, like a whole lot of different circumstances happen where they end up having Jacob ends up having a lot of kids with Leah and a couple of servants. Like in that day, like it was not uncommon for someone to have multiple wives and a big family with lots of kids. And we can go into that a different time. But what we do know is Rachel didn't have any kids. But the Bible says that, later, God remembered Rachel. God remembered Rachel and gave her a son, and that son's name was Joseph. And that's where we find Joseph. And so Jacob loved Joseph. I mean, that's what he wanted all along. And so it makes sense that at the age of 17, he's like sending him on these special errands. And what we find out is that Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of the other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for Joseph. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Now, this is interesting because this isn't just like Jacob got a pretty robe, and they got nothing, All of Jacob's sons would have gotten robes. I mean, that's part of what a dad does for his sons. And so all of them get a robe, but Joseph gets a second robe. You see, he's been known now to be the heir of Jacob. Well, that's a problem because all these others are older, and all these others should have rights that just got overlooked. And so they hated Joseph. And as if that wasn't enough, this dreamer starts to have some dreams. All right, so here's what happens. Joseph had a dream, and when he went and told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Now, this is also not the smartest thing to do. Like, you have a dream, and you're like, hey, this is a great thing that's happening. Here you go. And so here's what he says. Hey, guys, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out of the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, and all of your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to mine. We already hate you. Like, you don't need to say these things, right? And then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers as well. Listen, He said, I had another dream, and this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Joseph, I mean, like, I get that you have these dreams, but his brothers hated him. And even in this moment, his dad, who was also a dreamer, steps back and goes, hang on a second. Maybe you should slow your roll a little bit. And even Jacob tells him, hey, quiet down. That's not the best. You keep that stuff to yourself. And it's interesting what happens because Joseph has been given a dream by God. And he's told to be quiet about it. And not only that, his brothers actually hate him so much that they look to kill him. In chapter 37, verse 19, they say this whenever he goes to do another report on them. They see him coming from afar and they go, hey, look, here comes that dreamer. They said to each other, come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these pits, these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. You see, Joseph had a dream that was given by God. And yet, other people who should have understood God, who should have understood dreams, who had a history in their family of dreams, they all tried to quiet him. And it's at this point in the message that I feel like I need to pause to make a point. Here it is. The youngest brothers and sisters among us should be able to speak their dreams without fear of being slaughtered for doing so. The youngest brothers and sisters among us should be able to speak their hopes, to be able to speak where they feel God is leading us as a church without having to worry about retribution for them speaking what they see in their dreams, what they see that God is leading the church toward. And yet, as I work with kids and as I work with teens and students, I hear that they're scared to say certain things among the church. I mean, these students, they have huge dreams. If you've ever walked into our student center, you'll see one of the first things that we ever built and made was this huge, big old art piece, basically, that says, we dream of a church, ... And I just asked them, what are your dreams for this church? What are your dreams for the Big C church at large, like outside of Heritage? Write those things down, and we want to commemorate those things. And so they wrote down about all kinds of things, about loving people unconditionally. They wrote down about how they want to be known for unity in Jesus, not division. How's that one going? They want to be known as a family that is so close that people can't wait to get back to it because they enjoy being together so much. They want to be known as a place that makes Satan flee because they're so characterized by love and goodness and kindness. These are the dreams of our next generation. And yet, whenever they go to express them in some ways, sometimes it doesn't go well. Whether it's because of people being uncomfortable with what those dreams are, whether it's because we're a little calloused in our old age, whether it's because we feel entitled because we have served longer and our dreams are what matter now, not theirs, you're the church of tomorrow. Man, our kids and our students should be able to express their dreams that God is giving them, that God is placing on their hearts without fear of retribution. And we need to hear that because their dreams are powerful. Their dreams are good. But what are we doing with their dreams? Do you even know their dreams? Have you listened for what those dreams are? Have you taken time to hear their plans? Have you helped them to make plans? I don't know what your dreams are or how you've listened to other people's dreams, but a lot of times those dreams get squelched quickly. I remember whenever I first started into ministry off in East Texas, I had this moment where I was probably a couple of months in. I was the only minister on staff because our preacher had left. And there's this moment where this lady came to our church asking for help. And she was a sweet middle-aged lady that had just had this story about how she had encountered so much difficulty and she just needed some help getting back on her feet. She didn't have a place to stay. She was needing to get across country and just it wasn't happening. And so I remember going to some people that night that she showed up to our worship, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna do these things for her. And she didn't have a place to stay that night, and we were like, we've got an extra room or two in our house. We lived in this little parsonage right there on the church property. We'll just let her stay with us. I mean, we'll bring her in, we'll feed her, we'll make sure that she's got some money to go and all that kind of stuff. And I had an elder and a deacon come over and go, hey, that's probably not the smartest idea. You see, you need to be careful in these things. You have to use common sense in how you handle these things. Now, I know that there's wisdom there, maybe, but I don't see common sense coming up a whole lot as a reason to not do stuff in my Bible. And I remember being young, and they even said these words, you're just young and naive, you don't understand the ways of the world yet. You squash the dreams of the younger generation, and our church will not reach the horizons that God has intended for it. We need to be able to listen to the dreams of our younger generation and see what happens, to follow those dreams, lest they start to wane. And the next thing you know, those next generations are older, and they're not having the dreams either anymore. They've slowed. They've become non-existent. And so what are the dreams of our next generation? Joseph understood this because his dreams led him to be ostracized from his family. Like it didn't go well for him whenever he spoke these dreams. They didn't kill him, but what they did was they sold him into slavery. His brothers sold him into slavery, and he moved from this nation to that nation working on their behalf. And then the next thing we know, he's in the nation of Egypt, and he's having to work there, and God actually works with him and does some good things, and he grows, but at the same time he also gets thrown into jail again, another pit where he stays for years. He was supposed to be this great person. I mean, the dreams had said so, but the other people squashed that so long ago. And we don't know if Joseph ever had another dream again. The dreamer, we're not told of his dreams. How sad is that? And yet, we do know that even though he's not dreaming, there's other people around him that are having dreams. And he starts to interpret those dreams. And we see that Pharaoh had a dream. You see, our kids and our students have dreams, but other people have dreams too. Pharaoh has a dream. And in Genesis chapter 41, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. Now, what you'll notice here is Pharaoh had plenty of people around him that were always used to interpreting dreams. This was no problem. People have dreams and then people interpret them. We've got all these different people that interpret dreams, and they do a great job at it. But this one was different. This dream was strange. There was some kind of an element to the dream that just didn't make sense. And no matter who he brought in, nobody could decipher this dream. Nobody could interpret what this dream meant. And so he hears word that there's this guy down in this pit, down in this dungeon, that is able to interpret dreams. And he goes, why not? Bring him up. Nobody else can do it. And so as he meets with him, he says, I had a dream and nobody can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And Joseph looks at him and goes, I can't do it. Which, that's probably not the best thing. Joseph's not real good at choosing his words, but he goes, I can't do it. I just don't have that. But he goes on to say, but, God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. And I don't know if this is Joseph trying to cop out on this, or if it's a move of great faith from Joseph. I have yet to be able to determine that. But he says, I can't do it, but maybe God can give you something. And so he moves into this dream. And here's the dream that Pharaoh tells. Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. And then 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and weak, lean cows. And I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They just looked as ugly as they always had before. Now, there's an element in this story that nobody else could decipher. But maybe you know it. Maybe you see it. Because And for many of you, you grew up in church or you've heard the stories, and so you were told as a little kid how this plays out. And so you already remember how this dream plays out because you've heard the stories as a kid. But what's interesting is that's exactly how Joseph knew the interpretation of this dream. He had heard stories as a kid that influenced his ability to interpret this dream. So where he said, I can't do it, actually, he didn't even need God to be able to interpret this dream because the stories that had come before him had actually prepared him to be able to tell this interpretation. You see, there's cows, and there's this number 7 that nobody could interpret. And there's cows that are of healthy figure and beautiful, and then there's cows that are weak. Do you hear it? You see, Joseph had been told stories of how God had provided for their family long before he ever came around, before he was even a gleam in his mother's eye. God was preparing the way for this family. God was preparing for all nations to be blessed through this family. And as Joseph hears Pharaoh's dream, I wonder how much he just got chills. As I say that, like I get chills, it's crazy. I wonder how he got chills just going, God is here in this place. God is not far away. God is active. God is moving. God is doing something incredible. And what you may need to know is this. When you stop having dreams, just because you stop having dreams, God can still reach you through the dreams and stories of others. When you stop having dreams, God can still reach you through the dreams and stories of others. We'll come back to that. So here's what Joseph says in Genesis 41, 28 through 31. He says, Pharaoh, God has shown you what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming through the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. So he interprets the dream. He's able to tell him everything that he needs to know. And I'm sure Pharaoh was caught aback because no one else could do this. And all of a sudden, this kid is able to do it. That's impressive. But you know, even though Joseph's dreams may have faded, there's someone else there that has a dream that makes a difference in his life. He hears the story of God. He knows the story of God because other people have spoken that story in. And so whenever you go back to that slide, when you stop having dreams, God can still reach you through the dreams and stories of others. For many of you, you've lost your sense of dreaming. For many of you this morning, you may need to reach out to some kids. You may need to reach out to some teens and say, remind me what your dreams are. I've long forgotten how to dream, how to think big with my God. Can you tell me what your dreams for the church are? Ask them. I promise you, that's why I've stayed in ministry so long, is because their dreams keep me going so long. Even in those times whenever I'm like, God, I'm having such a hard time seeing it, that they see it, that they know it, and they speak it in powerful ways. Let the dreams of others influence you. But more than that, you know, your stories are needed. Your stories are needed. They need to hear your dreams. They need you to be in relationship with them, talking through what you've learned of God, what you've experienced with God, so that in those moments, long after now, whenever they may go to a different town, their life may take them in so many different directions, they will have those moments where it clicks with them and they say, oh, there's God. I remember this from whenever I was younger. Someone implanted this in me long before, and I sense my God moving. And when you sense your God moving, you keep moving with God. Here's what happens. So Joseph's already interpreted the dream, but he keeps going with Pharaoh. He says this, now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming up and store up the grain with the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, for all the country, right? For all peoples, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. Now that's a gutsy move for Joseph. Nobody called Joseph out of that prison to tell Pharaoh how to do Pharaoh's job. He was called up to interpret a dream, and that's all. But whenever Joseph sees God moving, whenever Joseph recognizes God moving, he boldly joins the mission of faith. That's our call too. When you recognize God moving, you boldly join the mission of faith. How have you heard of God moving through the dreams of the younger generation? How are you sensing it in your own dreams? And how are you choosing to move forward boldly? Because you know that your God has something in store for this world and for this church and for this community and for all nations through you, because God's doing something incredible. Are you listening to those dreams at all? Do you hear those dreams? You know, it's easy for me to say that as a minister, to stand up here and talk about the dreams of our next generation. And you guys expect that from me as a representative of the church. But let me tell you something. I'm also a dad. And whenever we hear the word church, a lot of times we think of the organization. But when I hear the word church, I think of you guys. Those of you that are sitting in this room, those of you that are watching at home right now, you're the church to my family. So whenever I think of my own kids as a dad, I'm going to be vulnerable with you real quick. I've got an 11-year-old boy named Dawson, and I've got a 9-year-old girl named Marley. And they have huge dreams for this world. Have you listened to their dreams? But not just my kids' dreams. Have you listened to all of our kids' dreams? All of our students' dreams? I'm going to actually ask my daughter Marley to step up on stage with me. You know, both of my kids don't have a problem living big dreams. Marley's one of them. She's got huge dreams for this world. She has dreams for herself, right? Big dreams, right? But she also has big dreams for this church. She has big dreams for our community, for her friends. And so do all of our students. So do all of our kids. But what I'm curious about is, have you seen her dreams? And have you seen the dreams of our next generation? And have you pointed them towards God? Have you seen your own dreams and recognized your own dreams and then pointed them back toward God? Are you living out a future of huge dreams through the righteousness of Christ, who has made it possible for us to do so? Are you living out your dreams, or have you long forgotten them? Are you empowering others to live out their dreams? The future is great with our next generation. But it takes many of us speaking into the stories of our next generation to understand that. Whether you're a parent or a small group leader or plugging into one of these ministries in different ways, how are you hearing their dreams and partnering along with them?
Call my own.
vividest colors fill my head.
A million dreams are keeping me away.
Million dreams, a million dreams.
We are incredibly fortunate to be a part of a church family that includes a number of dreamers. Dreamers like Marty Baker and Amy Newton and Amy Coronado and Kendra McClarty, who are the official leaders of our children's and student ministries, but there are so many other leaders in those ministries, adult volunteers, and also the kids themselves. We are so fortunate to be a part of a church family where together adults and children are listening, studying, dreaming, and wondering about the world that God wants to create just here in the community right here around us. And so we have an opportunity, and we talk pretty frequently here about taking next steps in our faith. We talk about what it looks like to move forward in the journey with Jesus. But part of what we're talking about there is taking the steps necessary to connect intergenerationally, to listen together, to dream together, and pay attention to what the Spirit of God is doing in and among us. You know, we live in an unprecedented time in history. There are 7 generations coexisting in the church at the same time. And for many in the church, the Christian faith is something that they've been pursuing for decades, literally for decades. And they have had experiences with God, and they've had moments of elation and excitement and being hardly able to believe what God has done in their midst. But over those decades, they've also experienced moments of disappointment with how things didn't turn out the way they thought they would. They've had moments when faith wasn't easy. They've had long years where waiting on God and listening for God wasn't as easy as it once seemed to be. And the easy thing to do would be to assume that those of us with all of the experience, with the most experience, are the ones who should always lead the way. But our vision as a church is not to be a church just full of a bunch of adults who happen to have a bunch of kids meeting down the hall. We want to be a church that encompasses the experiences and the spiritual intuition of all 7 of those generations. And so as we wrap up this morning, and as we talk about next steps, our invitation to you, as you look down at your orange shirt or the lei that you're wearing, as you think about what it means for you to participate in the orange vision around here, we're asking you to take a next step in that movement. You don't have to be a parent or a grandparent. You don't have to have children of your own, because if you're part of the church that Jesus is using to change the world, then part of your calling is to be connected to the other Christians that God is working through, so that everybody in our community would know somebody that loves Jesus and as a result loves them right back. That's what we're doing together. We're dreaming. We're dreaming about what's next, about where God might lead us, where God might take us, and what God might have us do that maybe none of us yet have had the imagination to dream. But when we work together, by the power of the Holy Spirit, when we listen to what God is telling us, we'll be shocked and amazed what God will do through our church.